The countdown has begun for British Prime Minister Theresa May. Her Brexit deal faces the Parliament test on the 15th of January. May has suffered a series of setbacks already. First, she lost the option to leave the European Union without a deal. May now needs the Parliament's approval for a no-deal Brexit. To add to the humiliation, members of her own party joined the opposition to inflict the second setback last night. Now the British government only has 3 days to come up with revised plans if May loses the Brexit vote next week. Theresa May now finds herself boxed in and she doesn't have many options. Meanwhile, the opposition has stepped up its efforts, asking for fresh elections. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is now demanding a general election to break the deadlock on Brexit.
If the government cannot pass its most important legislation, then there must be a general election at the earliest opportunity. A government that cannot get its business through the House of Commons is no government at all. It's lost its mandate, so must go to the country to seek another.
The United Kingdom is set to leave the European Union on the 29th of March. Last year, the EU had cleared a deal that can only come into force if the British Parliament clears it. But British lawmakers remain divided over Brexit. The Labour does not back the Brexit deal. The ruling Conservatives are split between a hard and a soft Brexit. A significant number of lawmakers still prefer that the UK leaves the EU without any deal, an idea that Theresa May is not going to entertain. Joining us is Catherine Drew, Wion correspondent from London. Good evening, Catherine. How much trouble is Theresa May in?
Well, she does face a tricky few days ahead of this crucial vote next Tuesday. Almost everyone expects that she will lose this vote by some measure. This is the vote, of course, that just 4 or 5 weeks ago she postponed after days of her own government ministers saying the vote on this withdrawal agreement would not be postponed. At the last minute, she withdrew it because the government was expecting a heavy defeat. Many people say that she is expecting another defeat. There was some glimmer of hope. MPs are continuing, and they're in the middle of the 5 days of debate on this withdrawal plan. And one MP, the first Conservative, George Freeman, he was the first person to switch. He says he doesn't like this deal, but that his constituents, when they voted to leave, they did not vote for a no-deal scenario. They did not vote for economic chaos. So he said with a heavy heart he's going to be backing it. Now, this is a glimmer of hope for Theresa May. This is what she's hoping for, that people will stare into the abyss of a potential no deal and think, well, we'd better back her deal. But as I say, and as you mentioned, an awful lot to play here. So it's going to be a tense few days for Theresa May.
Is it fair to say that it's near impossible then to stick to the deadline at least? And how do the people, the citizens of the UK, see this? Would they rather live without a Brexit now? Are they having second thoughts about that referendum in the first place?
Well, the deadline is indeed a tricky question. I mean, it could be that by default, the UK does tumble out of the European Union membership and fall back onto WTO trading terms, which many economists say could be catastrophic. Even the business minister, Greg Clark, was saying today that there could be catastrophic damage to the economy. So that is the big fear, which could play in Theresa May's favour. Many people, of course, calling for an extension of Article 50, which would mean that the UK would have to go back to the EU and basically ask for more time. Theresa May has ruled that out. But there are growing calls for this second referendum, led, of course, by the people who wanted to remain in the first place, remain within the European Union. There are growing calls, and some cabinet ministers have even said, such as Amber Rudd, the Work and Pensions Secretary, has said that such a referendum may be necessary. The big sticking block with this is that Labour, led by Jeremy Corbyn, as yet are not officially behind this second referendum, or at least he isn't. Many of his MPs are. He is gunning for this new general election. The timing isn't really on his side. I think Labour hopes they can have a very swift election, come into power, probably right up against that deadline, and then they would be forced to ask the EU for an extension. So a lot of scenarios. Should Theresa May lose the vote next week, then all of these scenarios come into play.
Catherine Drew, thanks very much for bringing us that update.